I was driving north after midnight, heading to my parents' house with my family asleep in the car, and I kept forcing my eyes open because I had already slept the night before and refused to admit I needed a break. Claire had offered to drive earlier, but I said I was fine and kept the wheel. My son Ethan and my daughter Lily were asleep in the back seat, leaning against each other, and Claire had closed her eyes beside me, scrolling through her phone for a while. The highway was empty in a way that felt wrong, with no headlights and no cars passing. I knew this road well, and I could list every exit in order without thinking, so I expected to see the gas station near exit 14 soon. It never appeared. The white lines kept sliding under the headlights while the road stretched forward without change, and I started gripping the wheel harder than necessary. I checked the clock and calculated the time in my head, and by that point, I should have passed at least 2 familiar landmarks. Instead, the highway continued straight with no exit signs and no buildings on either side. I reached for my phone to open the GPS, but it was not in the cup holder or my pocket, and when I checked the console, I found nothing. I did not wake Claire because I did not want to admit I was confused. 20 more minutes passed with no visible progress, and I shifted my attention to the fuel gauge because I knew I had started with less than half a tank. The needle showed completely full. I stared at it, expecting it to drop or flicker, but it stayed pressed against the maximum mark as if the car had not consumed a single drop. I tested the brake pedal carefully, pressing it with steady pressure while keeping my eyes on the road. The car did not slow down. I pressed harder, then tried lifting my foot from the accelerator, but my leg would not move and felt locked in place. My fingers were clamped around the steering wheel, and no matter how much I tried to loosen them, they would not release. The highway ahead changed abruptly, and deep cracks split across the lanes while dark red stains spread unevenly across the asphalt. The headlights revealed torn fabrics and shapes that looked disturbingly human scattered across the road. I blinked several times, hoping fatigue was distorting my sight, but the details sharpened instead of fading, and the car continued forward at the same speed over the broken pavement without swerving. I realized I had no control over the vehicle or my own body, and that understanding created a focused fear that pushed every other thought aside. Before looking into the rearview mirror, I hesitated because I sensed that whatever was behind me would confirm that this was not exhaustion. My chest felt tight and my pulse pounded loudly in my ears. When I looked, I saw 2 figures running directly behind the car at full speed, matching the vehicle without effort. Their arms bent sharply at wrong angles, and their mouths were stretched open as they screamed. The sound reached me through the closed windows, sharp and constant, and it drilled into my head without pause. Their eyes were fixed on me through the mirror. I tried to call Claire, forcing my voice out while my body stayed locked, but she did not move. The figures leaned forward as they ran, and their screams grew louder. I felt a hand grip my shoulder from the passenger side, and I turned my head slowly because I knew something was sitting beside me. A woman was there, with her neck twisted completely around and her face crushed out of shape. Yet her eyes were focused and intense. She leaned closer and spoke carefully. "Wake up. You do not belong here." Her grip tightened while the screaming behind the car rose to a piercing level that felt unbearable. For a brief second, all sound vanished, and that silence felt worse than the noise because it signaled something violent was coming. My vision narrowed while my hands remained locked to the wheel. The car jerked sharply to the right, and the headlights tilted toward darkness beyond the shoulder of the road. A violent impact followed as the vehicle dropped down and slammed into something solid. The steering wheel hit my chest, the windshield shattered, and my head snapped forward before slamming sideways. The seatbelt cut into my collarbone while the car twisted and stopped at an angle. I heard Ethan and Lily crying behind me, and the panic cut through the smoke filling the cabin. I turned toward Claire and saw her body slumped against the door with her neck bent at a severe angle, identical to what I had just seen. Men shouted outside while pulling at the doors, and rough hands dragged me out before cutting the seatbelt. They pulled the kids out next while they cried for their mother. As I lay on the ground, I saw them reach Claire and then slow down when they realized she was not moving. Sirens approached while my vision faded. I woke up under hospital lights with my chest wrapped and my arm in a sling, and a doctor explained that I had fallen asleep at the wheel before overcorrecting and sending the car off the road into a concrete barrier. He said my children would recover, but Claire died instantly from a neck fracture. The memory returned clearly, and I remembered her offering to drive because she saw how tired I was. I remember refusing and then closing my eyes for a second too long. I recalled waking up to the car drifting right and jerking the wheel sharply in panic, which caused the tires to lose grip and the vehicle to drop down the embankment. When I looked toward the door of the hospital room, I briefly thought I saw her reflection standing there with her head tilted unnaturally, but it disappeared when I blinked. 8 months have passed, and Ethan still wakes up from nightmares while Lily refuses to sit in the front seat of any car. They survived with minor injuries, but they ask about their mother often. I returned once to the highway during the day, and everything looked normal with intact pavement and clear exit signs. The gas station near exit 14 was exactly where it should be. I do not tell anyone about the endless road or the figures running behind the car, because the truth is simple and worse than any vision. I fell asleep while driving my family. When exhaustion hits late at night, I sometimes hear distant screaming in my memory, and I force myself to stand up and move instead of closing my eyes. I know what caused the crash, but the images from that drive remain sharp and refuse to leave. The last time I saw my daughter riding her bike, she turned at the corner near the highway and lifted her hand without looking back, and I remember thinking that I should have followed her just to make sure she was safe. That image has stayed with me longer than anything else. We went on vacation to a small coastal town that sat just off a long stretch of highway that cut through empty land before reaching the beach. The town looked peaceful and friendly, and it depended on travelers who stopped a few days before driving on. We rented a small house close enough to hear the trucks in the distance at night. On the second afternoon, she said she wanted to ride her bike along the service road that ran parallel to the highway. When the sun started to drop and the sky turned orange behind the highway signs, Tara had not returned, and my wife began checking the clock every few minutes. At first, we tried to stay calm, telling each other that she probably stopped to take photos. An hour passed, then another, and the sound of the trucks speeding along the highway became louder in the quiet evening. I called her phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail, and each unanswered call made my wife more anxious. We went to the local police station close to midnight, and the officer on duty listened with a neutral expression before explaining that they could not file a missing persons report until 24 hours had passed. He suggested that she might have left on her own or met someone passing through town, and he reminded us that young adults sometimes make impulsive decisions. The next morning, the highway looked different to me because it no longer felt like a road, but like a threat that had swallowed my daughter. My wife and I walked along parts of the shoulder where Tara liked to ride, scanning the ground carefully. Every piece of trash on the side of the road forced us to look twice, hoping and fearing at the same time that we would recognize something of hers. About 2 miles from town, near a faded highway sign, I saw something red partially hidden in dry grass. I stepped off the shoulder and walked toward it, feeling my breath grow heavier with each step as my wife called my name from behind. The front wheel was bent and the chain hung loose as if someone had forced it off. There were no skid marks on the asphalt and no sign of a car accident, which made the scene worse because it suggested that whatever happened did not involve a simple crash. A few feet away from the bike, I found her bracelet in the dirt, the same one I had given her years ago. It was not broken, just lying there like it had been placed on purpose. We called the police again and told them what we found, and they finally came to look at the site. They took photos and wrote notes, but I could see that they were careful with their words, avoiding anything that would suggest a serious crime near a highway that brought so much business into town. That afternoon, the atmosphere in our rental house shifted from fear to something darker, because we now knew that Tara had not simply decided to stay out longer. We sat at the table in silence, each lost in our own thoughts about what might have happened between the bike and wherever she was now. A knock on the door broke that silence. I walked towards the door slowly, already aware that whatever waited on the other side would not be good. An envelope lay on the porch, and inside was a Polaroid photo of Tara tied up with rope and tape over her mouth next to an old couch. We decided to act on our own. Every minute counted in our daughter's life. That night, I remembered that we had a family location app installed on our phones. I never knew how to use it, but it was time to act. Her location was still active, and that blinking dot appeared near a small cluster of houses not far from the highway, hidden behind dunes where travelers rarely stopped. I took the gun from the glove compartment and drove down the location, following a narrow road that branched off from the highway and led to a few isolated houses. The house that matched the location was small and worn, sitting close enough to the highway that passing trucks shook the thin windows. One light was on inside, and there were tire marks in the dirt that looked recent, which made my pulse quicken because it meant someone had been there not long ago. I stood outside the door listening carefully, trying to hear voices, movement, anything that would confirm she was inside. The tension built slowly as cars rushed by on the highway behind me, their headlights cutting through the dark and disappearing just as fast. When I pushed the door open, it creaked loudly and I stepped into a living room that looked ordinary at first glance. A couch, a low table, a chair tipped on its side, and on the table lay Tara's phone with the screen cracked but still glowing faintly. I called her name more than once, moving carefully toward the hallway, and my voice sounded weak in that small place. No one answered, and the silence that followed felt deliberate, as if the house itself were holding something back. In the bedroom at the end of the hall, the bed sheets were twisted and there were fresh footprints in the sand that had been tracked inside from the back door. I rushed outside toward the dunes behind the house, scanning the darkness for movement. The wind carried the distant noise of engines from the highway, and for a second, I thought I saw headlights moving away on a dirt path that connected back to the main road. I ran toward that path, but by the time I reached it, there was nothing except dust settling in the air. Whoever had been there had already left, and if Tara had been with them, she was now somewhere on that highway, swallowed by traffic and distance. I called the police from outside the house and told them exactly where I was, forcing my voice to stay steady even though I felt like I was losing control of the situation completely. When they arrived, they searched the house and collected the rope and tape, but their expressions told me that they were already preparing to treat this as another unresolved case. They asked why I had come alone instead of waiting for them, and I did not have a good answer that would satisfy anyone. I showed them the phone on the table and the location app that had led me there, and one officer muttered that whoever took her must have realized the phone was still active and left it behind. There were no neighbors willing to say they saw anything, even though the highway ran close enough for drivers to notice activity near the house. The officer said that with so many vehicles passing through, it would be nearly impossible to track which one might have picked someone up or forced them inside. When I returned to the rental house and told my wife that Tara had not been there, she broke down in a way that made me feel smaller than I have ever felt in my life. I had gone there believing I would bring our daughter home, and instead, I had only confirmed that she was gone and moving further away. The next morning, the local news mentioned increased patrols near the highway, but avoided using words that would scare tourists. Flyers with Tara's face began appearing near gas stations and rest stops, yet the road remained busy and indifferent, carrying strangers in and out without stopping. Months turned into years, and the highway never gave her back. We never received another photo or message, and no one ever admitted to seeing her get into a car that day. I still check online forums where people discuss disappearances along highways, reading theories that range from organized crime to random predators who look for isolated roads. None of those theories bring her closer. Tara Calico was a 19-year-old woman who disappeared in 1988 while riding her bike along a highway during what seemed like a normal summer outing. She never returned home, and months later a Polaroid photograph surfaced showing a young woman bound and gagged, leading many to believe the girl in the image could be her. The photo intensified national attention and turned her disappearance into one of the most disturbing unresolved cases in the United States. Surrounded by conflicting witness accounts, rumors about passing vehicles, and ongoing theories that continue decades later.
This story is a dramatized retelling inspired by real-life crime cases. All names, locations, and events have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes. I never thought much about the dangers of night driving. In cities like Phoenix, Arizona, rideshare driving after midnight was normal. Quiet roads, better pay. I'd been doing it for almost 2 years. No incidents, no close calls, until the night I accepted that ride. It was 1:43 a.m. when my phone buzzed. Pickup location, an abandoned strip mall on the edge of town. No profile photo, no destination listed. I hesitated, then accepted it anyway. When I pulled up, there was a man standing under a flickering streetlight. Tall, thin, hands in his jacket pockets. He got into the back seat without saying a word. The door closed, and for some reason, the car suddenly felt too small. For the first 10 minutes, neither of us spoke. I tried making conversation. So, long night? Nothing. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, his eyes weren't on me. They were on the door locks. Then he finally spoke. "You ever hear about the drivers who go missing out here?" My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. I laughed nervously. "No, can't say I have." He smiled. "They never find the bodies." My GPS suddenly rerouted. The road narrowed. Streetlights disappeared, warehouses, dirt lots, nothing else. That's when he said it. "Pull over." I slowed down. Before I could ask why, I felt cold metal press against the back of my seat. A knife. "Don't scream," he said calmly. "I'm not here to hurt you, if you do exactly what I say." He leaned forward, his breath close to my ear. "You know why rideshare drivers are perfect victims?" I shook my head. No fixed schedule, no witnesses, and everyone assumes the passenger is the danger. My heart pounded. Then he whispered, "But tonight, you're different." He told me to keep driving. After 5 minutes, we stopped near an empty drainage canal. He opened the door, then froze. Red and blue lights flooded the road. Police. He dropped the knife. As officers dragged him out, one of them looked at me and said, "Sir, are you okay?" I nodded. But then the officer added something that made my blood run cold. "We've been looking for him for months." At the station, I learned the truth. He wasn't targeting drivers. He was posing as a passenger, forcing drivers to take secluded routes, then killing them and staging it to look like robberies gone wrong. 6 drivers, all unsolved, until tonight. Because earlier that evening, I'd installed a dash cam, audio included. Everything he said, everything he confessed, was recorded. I quit rideshare driving the next morning, but sometimes, when I'm stuck in traffic late at night, I look in my rearview mirror, and for a split second, I expect to see someone sitting there, silent, waiting.
For as long as I can remember and for the majority of my adult life, I've been on the road for multiple hours every day. Just like everyone else, I have places to go, people to meet, and things to do. But no matter how routine the drive feels, people lose their lives every day on these roads, and honestly, that thought has always unsettled me. So I made it a rule of mine when I first started driving to be as careful as possible when on the road. I follow the laws, pay attention to the signs, and never put speed over my safety and the safety of others. But on December 30th, 2024, I learned the harsh truth that no amount of caution matters when the strangers you share the road with decide they're going to kill you. My name is Andrew Hayes, and by the time the incident happened, I had been working as an Uber driver for about 4 years and saving up money to start my own business. That day started off as just another shift for me. I had dropped off a passenger named Blair and was on my way back to the next pickup when I noticed things started to get a little strange. It all started about 4 minutes into the drive when I came up behind a white RAV4 with a unique license plate that caught my attention and read, "In Hell." I stayed behind the same car on the road for the next 5 minutes when the car suddenly started moving frantically from left to right. Concerned, I slowed down and backed off a little. As I figured, the driver was either having difficulties controlling the wheel or was drunk. After a while, the car went back to normal, and as I sped up to close the distance between us, the car stopped abruptly. I quickly hit my brakes, stopping just inches away, my heart in my mouth. My initial reaction was concern, as we were both stopped in the middle of oncoming traffic, and a part of me wanted to get down to check on the driver ahead and make sure they were all right. Before I made that mistake, however, the driver revealed his true intentions, and I immediately realized that I didn't need to be checking on him, but getting as far away as possible. The white car hit reverse in an attempt to crash into me, but I backed up and dialed the cops quickly. "Police, how may I help you today?" "Hello, police? Yes, someone's trying to back up into me on the highway." The officer began asking multiple questions as I tried to explain that the man was reversing towards me at high speeds, going the opposite way of traffic. As I was explaining, though, the car ahead stopped, and I put enough distance between us thinking he was going to go away. Sadly, I was wrong. I watched in horror as the driver turned his car around and slammed the accelerator and charged towards me head on. Nothing about what he was doing made any sense, so in panic, I explained what was happening to the police officer on the phone while backing away from the car and deeper into traffic. This didn't last very long, however, and soon enough, his car smashed into mine, and he began to steer me towards the bridge and into the other cars headed our way. After seeing car after car swerve past us and missing me by just an inch, a part of me accepted the fact that I was going to die that morning. Even though I could hear the police officer asking questions in the background, my mind wasn't there, and I found myself constantly asking why this person was doing what he was doing. Eventually, however, I snapped back into reality as the officer said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to answer me if you want to stay alive. Can you confirm where you are for me?" At that point, I realized they already had officers on the way, and all I needed to do was buy some time for them to arrive. I began looking around frantically, trying to figure out what to do when I noticed we were now very close to the side of the bridge. If we crashed into that, he wouldn't be able to steer me out using his car. I knew it was a crazy attempt, but it was also the only plan I had at the time. So I grabbed the wheel, backed away to give myself a little leverage from him, and turned, slamming into the side of the bridge. Once I did that, my car stopped moving back as expected, and the other car was now at my side instead of in front, giving me the first opportunity to look at the face of the maniac behind the wheel. The woman I saw across from me was a brunette in her late 40s, with tattoos all over her face, screaming at me. My eyes stayed fixed on her as she screamed and cursed at me while spitting and foaming at the mouth. She looked rabid, like a dog, and during all this, I screamed and panicked. But the moment I saw the space in front of me open up a little, I hit the gas and began speeding towards the police station downtown, forgetting all other safety precautions I thought I would always have. My foot remained on the gas as I sped down the highway and explained what was happening to the officer on call. This was when I glanced in my side mirror to see the white RAV4 barreling towards me still, and my heart pounded out my chest. I knew this was the final stretch of madness, and if she caught up to me, I was dead. In about 3 minutes, I was off the highway and in downtown Ontario. I felt a sudden sense of calm, as I knew this had increased my chances of survival by a lot. But just as I was about to let out a sigh of relief, my whole body jolted forward from the force of her car smashing into mine. My head slammed into the dashboard just as the airbag exploded into my chest, forcing the breath out of me. My vision blurred as the car spun out of control. Tires screeched against the slick pavement, and before I could even process what was happening, I was in the air, and my vehicle flew straight through the front of a McDonald's. I heard and felt glass shatter, and the last thing I remember were screams as tables and chairs flew in every direction. After that, it all faded, and all that was left were the blaring sounds of distant sirens coming towards the chaos. In the weeks that followed, I went through both mental and physical therapy, as I had lost some function in my legs after the incident. The crazed driver was a woman named Sasha Barton, an ex-convict with no real reason for doing what she did other than crazy theories like I had been following her and stalking her for weeks. Truth is, I had never seen that woman a day in my life before the incident, but I've been carrying her around ever since, as well as the other 2 casualties from the McDonald's incident that I'll never stop feeling responsible for. Sasha was sentenced to life in prison, and although it's just been a couple of months since, I don't think I'll ever forget that afternoon on the highway. So I hope you take this as a warning and remember that everyday trips, visits to friends, and quick grocery runs feel routine. But the roads you trust are shared with strangers who can change your life in an instant. I was careful. I followed the rules. It didn't matter. Remember the next time you drive, because one day, a stranger might decide your fate, like Sasha decided mine. This story is partially based on real events and footage that occurred on Highway 11 in Northern Ontario on December 30th, 2024. The event was taken down as an extreme case of road rage as a man attacked his victim for no apparent reason, slamming into him multiple times before proceeding to chase him through the highway traffic and running him off the road. This case should be taken as a reminder of just how volatile strangers on the road can be, and a grieving reminder that you can prepare for it all, but not for situations like these.